Hey everybody, it's Michael. I'm back again with another walkthrough video, and today I would like to show you A Feast for Odin. A Feast for Odin is the new game by Uwe Rosenberg. The version I have here is a pre-production copy of the English version that will appear from Zman Games at Feuerland Spiele in October 2016. The German version, called Ein Fest für Odin, will appear from Feuerland Spiele also at Essen. A Feast for Odin is for 1 to 4 players. There's a solo mode, ages 14 and up, and it plays in about 30 minutes per player. As you can probably guess from the title and the illustration, this is a Viking themed game, one of many actually to come out this year. I don't know if I have to say more about the theme. Basically everything is there. There's plundering, raiding, there's also peaceful trading, there's shipbuilding, and basically what you're trying to do is to build the most wealth, and for that you can either go the route of pillaging and plundering or the route of trading or any mixture in between. So far for the theme. When we start to talk about mechanics, it gets really interesting. If you know anything about this game, then you probably know that Patchwork, another Rosenberg game that came out in 2014, was actually a side product of this game, and one of the main mechanics here is that you puzzle different tiles of different sizes and shapes into a grid, your so-called home board. So this is one of the mechanics, getting tiles and puzzling them onto your board. Then there's worker placement, a little bit different than you might expect. There's also some die rolling, so random elements. And finally, the occupation cards from Agricola have, well, let's call it a comeback. So hopefully by now you're very interested about what's actually happening in this game. So what I'd like to do now is show you a full 3-player game. One caveat, I made a couple of very stupid mistakes. They're all annotated, so you hopefully learn the rules the right way by watching this video. Enjoy nevertheless. I've set up a 3-player game, and as always, let's take a brief look at the components first. Each player, blue, red and yellow, has their home board, and let's take a closer look at the home board of the blue player. This is your ting square, where basically your available workers / Vikings are held until you use them. Up here we have a round overview. As I said, we'll be playing the short game with 6 rounds, and basically each round you'll get a new Viking. This up here is the banquet area, where you have to prepare the banquet, otherwise you'll get minus points, but more on that later. Then here we have the landing base for our ships that we can build. Down here are the stables for sheep and cattle respectively. And then finally this is the big puzzle area. Basically there are 3 notable things about it. There are spaces that'll give you -1 victory points at the end of the game, so you're supposed to cover ideally all of them. Then there's this income diagonal, and each round you'll receive income according to the lowest visible value. So right now it's an income of 0, but once, for example, these 2 spaces are covered with goods, then your income is 2. And it can go up to 18 if you cover everything. And finally there are certain goods. These are bonus spaces. Once one of these spaces is completely enclosed, then you'll receive 1 good of that kind each round as a bonus. Each player starts with 3 weapons, a bow and arrow, a snare and a spear, and also 1 occupation card that is in each player's hand secretly. Each player starts with 1 horn of meat, and the blue player is the starting player, signified by that moose token. Then we have dice, penalty tokens, the action board where the players will perform their actions, different buildings, longhouses, stone houses and sheds. Up here we have 4 islands that can be discovered / explored during the game. Here we have mountain strips with various resources on them. We have an area where the different ships can be built or bought. There are actually more ships in the game, and I'll refill as soon as it's necessary. We have different resources: ore, wood, stone, silver, more occupation cards, more weapon cards, a round overview, a tableau for the special tokens, and finally all the good tokens arranged into trays. Basically there's 4 colors. Orange is produce, red is animal related goods, green is common goods, and blue is luxury goods. And actually these 4 colors form a hierarchy, so orange is the least valuable one and blue is the most valuable one. Also we have double and single pieces of silver in here. And then we can already start the game. As already mentioned, the game will go for 6 rounds, and each round has 12 phases. In the first phase, everybody gets a new Viking. So we take the leftmost Viking from the banquet table and simply put it into our ting square. Next up is the harvest, and on our board we can see that in the first round we'll have a harvest, and we can harvest 1 of each harvest good with this symbol, so a bag with a 1 in it. And as we can see, peas have a 1 in it. Flax actually has a 2. But beans has a 1. Wheat has 2. Cabbage has 3. And fruit have 4. So basically each player will get 1 pea and 1 bean in their supply. Okay, that was actually a really dumb error. Flax, of course, has a harvest value of 1. Grain has a value of 2, and there was 1 piece of grain in the flax. Although I'm splicing this in now, it's actually the harvest phase of round 3 that I'm realizing this. I'll fix the error later by giving out the additional flax, but please be advised because of this, because each player had 1 less good to use in the first round. The beginning of the game might seem a little harsher than it's actually supposed to be. Sorry for that. Next up, we have to turn exploration boards and play silver, but in the first round that doesn't happen. Then everybody draws a new weapon randomly from the stack. And since weapons are always face up, we can just do that now. So the blue player has a second bow and arrow, red gets a second snare, and yellow gets a long sword. Then we come to the meat of the game, phase 5 actions. Starting with the starting player, everybody will take a certain amount of Vikings, put them on one space, one unoccupied space on the action board, take the action immediately, and then it's the next player's turn until everybody has placed all their Vikings. Why a certain amount of Vikings? That's because the actions are arranged into 4 columns, and if you want to take an action in the first column, it costs 1 Viking. If you want to take an action in the last column, it takes 4 Vikings. The blue player starts by getting some resources. He'd like to go to this space, it's in the second column, so he has to place 2 Vikings there. And basically he gets 1 wood per player, as well as 1 ore, for a total of 3 wood and 1 ore. The yellow player decides to go to this space on the weekly market, so that costs him 3 Vikings. However, whenever you use a space that costs 3 Vikings, you get to draw a occupation card. By the way, the reason that this one is light and this one is dark is that the starting cards are the lighter ones and the ones you can draw during the game are the darker ones. And then you get 1 piece of fruit, oil, salted meat and a silver. And by the way, the different shapes and sizes of these goods are of course related to puzzling them on the board, but more on that later. The red player starts by moving onto this space with 2 Vikings, so he'll get some flags, a fish and 1 silver. The blue player decides to go hunting for game with 1 Viking, and hunting game is one of the actions where you roll a die. In this case it's the orange 8-sided one, and in hunting game you can improve your rolls by giving up bows and arrows and wood. Now the thing is, we can roll that die up to 3 times. Each new roll invalidates the one before it, and we want to roll as low as possible, so let's go. That one's a 5. The thing is, we have to get to 0 to actually be successful on our hunt. And we can reduce our roll by 1 each by paying wood and or bows and arrows. The thing is, we have 3 wood and 2 bows and arrows, so we could actually take this 5 and be successful, but we'd have to give up all 5 of these items, so let's roll again. That one's better, so we take it. You just pay 1 bow and arrow, back to the supply, and then our hunting action was successful, and we get 1 hide and 1 game meat. The yellow player decides to use all of his remaining 4 Vikings to move onto this space in the trading area. Whenever you use a space that costs 4 Vikings, you get to play an occupation card. So let's do that first. This one is the Sober Man. It'll give him 2 victory points at the end of the game. Now, as a quick intermezzo, there's different kinds of occupation cards. The red ones are so-called every time cards. They have a condition and a benefit, and whenever that condition is met, you get the benefit. And whenever he holds a feast that is without meat, then he'll get a silver. And the space he wants. First, you can take 2 resources from each of up to 4 mountain strips. The thing is, there are only 2 mountain strips, and when taking resources, you always have to take them starting from the left. So basically, you can take 2 wood off of this one and 2 wood off of the other one. And then he can upgrade up to 3 goods. This grid is any one good, and he can upgrade them twice. What does that mean? Let's start with this horn of meat. We return it. And an upgrade is always in the same category, and since we're upgrading it twice, we skip the oil and get 1 rune stone in return, from red to blue. Next up are the beans. So beans become linen. And then fruit becomes a rope. And this is not actually upgrading, as in we turn fruit into a rope, it's trading. Red decides to take this space, that'll cost him 2 Vikings. And on here he has to pay 1 silver to the bank to get a sheep, which is then placed into a stable. The blue player decides to take this space down here. He can draw 1 occupation card and also get a silver. The yellow player has to pass, he doesn't have any Vikings left. The red player decides to get another sheep by taking all his 3 Vikings and putting them on here in the 3rd column, where he can get either a sheep or a cow by paying 1. So he now already has 2. Back to blue, he decides to move on here with 2 Vikings, so he'll get 2 meat and 2 silver. And then it's back to him again, and he decides to go on this trading space where he can upgrade 2 goods by 1. So he takes his hide and turns it into silverware, and the game meat, and turns it into skin and bones. Okay, then phase 5 is over. Everybody has placed all their Vikings. We determine the start player. The start player is the player who placed a Viking last. That was blue, so he is still the start player. And then before we move into phase number 7, income, everybody takes some anytime actions. Anytime actions can, surprise, surprise, be taken anytime, and one of those is to actually place things on your board. The yellow player decides to take linen and puts it on here. On the rules of placing, you can place everywhere you like. So right at the beginning you could start to cover these negative points, but they will only come into account at the end of the game. In the beginning you're probably trying to improve on the income diagonal. The thing is, to cover a space on the income diagonal, all the spaces to the left and below it have to be covered, and also everything in that rectangle described by those 2 lines. So basically, to cover the one, this space, and this space has to be covered. So by placing something on here, we're fine, we've followed those rules. Now, to be able to cover this 2, then we'd have to cover these 2 spaces and this one, because the spaces with the bonus goods are already considered covered. So now we will receive an income of 2 in the next phase. That's why it's prudent to do these anytime actions before the income phase, but we're not done yet. To be clear, what can be placed on these boards? Only blue and green goods. Blue goods can be placed adjacent to each other. Green goods can touch each other only on the corners, it's only diagonal. You can place silver on here as well on single spaces, and that can be adjacent to each other as well as ore. So the yellow player decides to take this runestone and puts it on here. Then if we want to place the oil, we can't put it here because then it's next to something green. We can't put it here yet because we're not allowed to cover the 2. So what we can do is maybe something like this, because they don't have to be placed adjacent to each other, and we can fill in those little spaces later on with silver. The red player doesn't have any blue or green goods yet, so he can't do anything because he also doesn't have any silver. If he had 1 silver, it would be ideal. He could place it on here and then his income would be 1 higher. The blue player decides to put the skin and bones like this, then the silverware up here. Then if he puts 1 silver here, all of the spaces that are required to cover this 2 are covered. So now with another silver he can also cover this one. Then we move into the income phase. Everybody gets income. The blue player gets 2, so does the yellow player, and the red player receives nothing. However, now the animals are breeding, and if you have 2 animals of the same kind, one of them becomes pregnant. Then we have the feast. Everybody has to fill the spaces on the banquet table from the left up until where his Vikings are, so it gets harder each round because you remove 1 Viking each round. And you can place red and orange goods, so basically produce and animal related goods. You can't place orange goods next to each other, and you can't place red goods next to each other, but you can use silver and you can't use ore. Okay, so he can start by putting a meat like this, then the peas, because then red is not touching red and the other way around. Then he can place another meat, but the thing is, Vikings love diversity, so as soon as you use a second good of a type you already have, you're only allowed to place it vertically. So it looks like this, and then we still have a gap of 2. We could put in the beans, they'll fill it exactly, or 2 silver, but that's too valuable, so let's do it like this. So we've done our job, the banquet is filled, so we don't get any penalties, and basically after that we can immediately discard everything. Yellow takes salted meat, peas, and a silver. He fulfilled the condition on his card, a feast without meat, so he'll take a silver as reward. and everything is discarded. And red takes flax, meat and peas, and it's also done without any penalty. Then we move into the bonus phase. The blue player has the meat space totally uncovered, so receives 1, but no other player gets any bonuses. Then we have to update the mountain strips and add new ones. And the way this works is that you remove the leftmost good on each strip. If by then the only thing remaining on a strip would be the 2 silver, the entire strip would be removed. And regardless of whether any strips were removed or not, a new one is added and filled. And then finally in phase 12, all Vikings are removed from the board and returned to their respective players' supplies. And then we move into a new round where everybody gets a new Viking. Then harvest. But in the short game there is no harvest on round 2. Then exploration boards. And in round number 2, the A board is turned to its other side. So Shetland can no longer be explored, but Bear Island is available instead. And then you put 2 silver on each board that hasn't been turned this round. So these become more interesting to discover. Then everybody draws a new weapon. And then there's actions again, starting with blue. The blue player decides to go to the market to get flax, fish and a silver. Yellow decides to take 4 Vikings, put them on this market space here. So by paying 3 silver, he gets a sheep and a cow. And also because for placing in the last column, he gets to play an occupation card, and the card can be played before or after taking the action. He likes to play it now after the action. And that one is a breeder. Yellow cards are so-called once cards because the effect resolves exactly once at the time that the card is played. And that allows him to turn a non-pregnant cow into a pregnant one, although it's all alone. And not only has it increased in victory points through that, it allows him to get a baby cow this round. Red decides to take this base, so he gets fruit, oil, salted meat and a silver. And he also gets to draw 1 occupation card. The blue player moves on this base, where he can play up to 2 occupation cards. And he decides to play the slow poke. Each round after the bonus phase, he can turn either a silver or a meat into oil. And then an anytime card, where he can buy 1, 2 or 3 hides for 2 silver each. He decides to pay all 4 silver and get 2 hides. Yellow decides to go to the market to get 2 meat and 2 silver. The red player decides to move on this base with 4 Vikings. He gets to play a card, he decides to play it first. It's a shepherd with at least 2 sheep, including pregnant sheep. He gets a milk and a wool cloth. If he had at least 4 sheep, he would get 1 more, but he only has 2. Actually, he wanted to do this base because here he can do both. He can do one or the other. He can either take 4 wood from this strip, 2 stone, 1 ore and 2 silver from this one, or 3 stone and 2 silver from the one in the middle, and he decides to completely empty this strip. And then he can upgrade 2 goods twice. He chooses the milk and the fruit. The fruit become a rope and the milk becomes a chest. The blue player decides to build a ship. For 2 wood he can get one of these knars, which are basically trading vessels. Here's 2 wood. Gets one of these and puts it into one of the spaces on the board. Yellow decides to go to the market, pay 2 silver to get 2 salted meat. Red, with his last Viking, decides to upgrade 2 goods per 1. He turns a rope into a big treasure chest and a linen into a smaller treasure chest. The blue player decides to go crafting. On this space he can turn 1 wood or ore. He decides to pay wood into a small chest and 1 silver. And finally the yellow player decides to get some beans and a silver. The start player will be determined. It's yellow. Income, but before players take any time actions. Blue places the chest down here, and if he places the hide like this, then it's legal because he can cover the 2 and green tiles are only adjacent, touching their edges. So this is all he does. Yellow decides not to do anything. He could only place the rope, and that won't do him any good. Red places this big treasure chest for fading this bonus. Then he places the oil and 1 silver over here, and then this chest over here and the other one over here. Blue receives 3 income, yellow receives 2 and red receives 3. Then breeding. Red has one pregnant sheep, so it becomes non-pregnant again, but another sheep is added. Yellow's cow becomes unpregnant and another cow is added. And from now on, since he has two, they can of course also breed. Then it's the feast. Blue uses fish, flax and meat. Yellow uses salted meat, beans and meat. He does not receive his bonus for a feast without meat, and red can use salted meat, beans and 2 silver. The fish would have been too large, he could have placed it upside down and used another silver, but he decides to keep it. Now, before the bonus phase, players could actually use their newly gained silver to cover spaces on the home board to unlock more bonuses, but that is not relevant for now. Blue receives 1 meat, thanks to a special ability, can turn it into oil. Then we have to update our mountain strips. Remove this one and this one. This one is gone anyway because it's empty, and then we get a new one. And everybody takes back their Vikings. Then we can move into the next round, where everybody gets a new Viking. Then it's the harvest again. Every player gets harvest goods with a 1 or 2 on them. And since I did that mistake early on, let's now say that everybody gets the flags they didn't get before now. And I guess that's better than not correcting the error at all. Then it's exploration boards. In round number 3, we're turning B to the other side. Whenever an island with silver on it is turned, the silver is discarded. And then each other board gains 2 silver. Everybody draws a new weapon. And then we move into actions. Yellow decides to perform this upgrade action. Then he may also draw an occupation card. He can upgrade 4 goods. He turns flax into fish, grain into meat, a rope into a chest, and salted meat into linen. On second thought, after seeing his card, he decides to keep the grain as it is, but instead turn beans into milk. Red decides to go to the blacksmith. He first gets to draw a card, and then he can turn 1 ore into a special tile that has this forge prongs on it, and those are the tiles in this section here, marked by the tongue symbols again. However, there's some slight errata, because the crucifix has a prong as well, and as I understand it, it's supposed to be this way. So it's not simply that this is a misprint with the prong symbol on here, but this tile should actually be in the section down here. And he can choose anyone he likes, and he decides to take this hammer. And as with any other tile, and this is actually considered a blue tile, it's placed into supply. Blue decides to take a crafting action and turn flax into linen. Yellow decides to take this action over here, so he gets to play a card. He will do this afterwards. So he gets some spices, a silver, 2 milk if he has at least 1 cow, and 1 wool if he has at least 1 sheep. Then he plays his card. It's another one-time card. He can pay a grain and 2 silver to get another cow. And that's why he kept his grain. Red wants to take this action, so he gets to draw yet another card. And here he'll get 3 wool, since he has 3 sheep. The blue player performs yet another craft action. Here he can turn linen and hide into clothing, and also get 2 silver. Yellow decides to build a whaling boat for 1 wood. Red decides to upgrade 2 goods. Blue decides to take this trading space. He needs a knar for that, which he has. And then he can buy up to 2 of the special tokens, but he has to pay their price in silver. As we can see, each item, except for the Crown of England, has a cost in silver printed on there. And he decides to buy this one for 2, and this one for 1, for a total of 3. Yellow takes this action. Here he can take 1 resource from a strip. He takes the stone from over here, and he can also upgrade 1 good. And he turns milk into wool. Red decides to upgrade 3 goods. Milk becomes another wool, and fish becomes hide. Blue wants to explore another island. He wants to explore Iceland. Iceland is here in the second column, and you either need a knar or a longboat. He has a knar, so he simply puts it into his area. He gets the 4 silver on it, and he can now place goods on there as well. it'll be worth 16 points at the end of the game. However, there are 24 minus 1 points on here, so he better cover them. And then finally he uses another action that is available with the Knar, the overseas trading, where he has to pay 1 silver, but then he can turn any number of different green goods into blue ones. So he pays a silver, but then the oil becomes a rune stone and the cloth becomes silver. Then blue is the new starting player again, and then move into income, but of course everybody fills their boards before that. Red places a chest over here, a silver next to it, the hide down here, the wool over here, then another silver here, and then he can place the hammer in here. He is allowed to cover this 3 space because everything is covered, as well as the 4 space. Then he can place a silver down here, a wool over here, and then he's also allowed to cover the 5. Yellow puts a silver in here, wool over here, and then he can cover the 2 2s with the spices like this. And then he places the silver over here, the big treasure chest, and then he's allowed to cover the 3, and he also puts a wool up here. Blue starts with Iceland. He puts a rune stone down here, and then he can place the silver like this, covering the 1, 2 and the 3 legally, so he's created an income of 4. Then he places this tile, completely enclosing the fish, so he'll get it as a bonus later on. Then on his main board he decides to place 2 silver like this, then he can cover the 3, and that's it. So for the income, blue gets 4, plus another 4 is 8, red gets 6, and yellow gets 4. Then animal breeding, one of yellow's cows becomes pregnant, and so does one of red's sheep. Then we have the feast. Blue uses grain, meat and flax. Red uses flax, salt meat and peas. And yellow uses flax, fish, peas and a silver. And then, since that was a feast without meat, he gets 1 silver back. Then it's bonuses. Blue decides to use 2 silver, so he gets a wood and a meat and a fish, and he can also turn 1 silver into oil. Red decides to use 1 silver up here and 2 more down here, so he gets an ore, a wood, a stone and a rune stone. And finally yellow places a silver here, so he gets a meat and an ore. Then we update the mountain strips, so the wood is gone, the stone is gone, the wood is gone. Then this one gets discarded. Then return our Vikings and can move into round number 4. Then everybody gets another Viking. Harvest. But there actually is none this turn. Then islands. Seawood is supposed to be turned, but it's no longer there. Nevertheless, the other islands receive silver. Everybody gets a new weapon. And then there's actions. Blue decides to get 3 wood and 1 ore. Yellow decides to build another whaling boat for 1 wood. Red moves in this space, so he receives 3 wool, as well as 1 new occupation card. Blue uses the blacksmith again, but before that he also gets to draw an occupation card. He gives up an ore, and can choose any of these 3 tiles as well as the crucifix. I guess now is a good time to point out that the jewelry tile also has the forged tongs on it, so whenever you go to the smithy you could also choose 1 piece of jewelry. And then he decides to get the battle axe and immediately puts it on Iceland to cover a bunch of negative points. And he didn't cover any spaces he wasn't supposed to. Yellow decides to go and lay a snare. It's again with the orange die, and this time snares and wood can help to improve the result. A 6 is too much. Let's go again. A 7, so let's do 1 more try. And a 3. So basically by giving up all 3 of his snares, The hunt is successful. As reward, he gets a hide and another snare back. And of course, that's a fur and not a hide. Hide is the smaller piece. The red player wants to go on this space up here, but first he can play a card. The follower. He's allowed to use an occupied second column action without placing Vikings. He decides to take this one, so he receives 3 wood and 1 ore. And now for 2 wood and 2 stone, he can actually pay the cost of the space that he wants to move into. And here he can either build a longship and a stone hut, or a longhouse and a knar, but he wants to do the first thing. So he gets a longship, a longboat, and also a stone house. Now the stone house is worth 10 victory points at the end of the game, but there's 9 -1 spaces. These can be covered in the usual way. This one can be covered by putting a stone and a wood there. He can get a bonus hide, and the important thing is that you can't place ore into houses. You can place red and orange goods as well, and you can also place green goods next to each other. Blue decides to take a free action that I haven't shown you yet. That is, at any time you want, you can buy a boat for its silver cost, and he decides to buy a whaling boat for 3. Then he wants to take an action in the 4th column, the one down here actually, which is a special sort of emigration. We haven't talked about emigration yet, but first he can play an occupation card, and he plays a tutor. Instead of drawing 1 occupation, he can play 1 occupation. Now we have to see how useful this card will become, but on the other hand, it's 2 victory points. Now, first of all, he can turn 1 whaling boat into a knar, which he does, that's why he bought 1. And then he can perform the immigration action, which basically means he has to pay silver equal to the current round number, that's 4. But then he can turn a knar or longboat on its back, which is the immigration side. So this moves up here on the banquet table, and 2 things happened. First of all, that's 18 points at the end of the game, and now we have to fill a smaller portion of our banquet table at the next feast. Yellow is still taking small steps. He decides to take 2 resources from 1 mountain strip. Red places his last 3 Vikings down here. He can play up to 4 occupation cards, but before that he gets to draw another one. Let's start with the Peacemaker. In the draw a new weapon phase, he can, instead of drawing a new weapon, get any 1 resource. And then another one-time card, Homecomer. He can return 1 Viking from each extreme space in the 4th column, so he gets 1 Viking back. The Wholesaler. He can upgrade 4 goods, but all of them have to be of the same type. He has 3 wool, they all become chests. And finally a Helmsman. This one is a mixed card. First it has a one-time effect, he gets another chest, and then it's also a conditional card. Whenever he uses a longship, he can draw a weapon card. For his last action, Blue decides to try his luck at hunting game. 4 would be doable, he decides to go again. 1, that's perfect, he pays 1 bow and arrow, and gets hide and gain meat. Yellow goes to the market to get fruit, oil, salted meat and 1 silver, plus 1 occupation card. Red decides to go raiding. For that you need a longship, but if the longship has any ore in it, you can't use it. It doesn't, because we haven't talked about this yet. And then you can roll the orange die and perform a raiding attempt. The thing is, while for hunting and whaling you have to roll low, for raiding and pillaging you have to roll high. That's a 5. The result can be boosted by giving up stone and or longswords. We have 1 longsword and 1 stone, so we could boost this up to a 7. I haven't talked about what the result means, but let's simply go again. A 3, okay, so that's bad. Let's take 1 more shot at this. Okay, that's a 1. We can only push this up to a 3, so that's a failure. But if you fail, as a consolation prize, you get the things that could be used to improve the results. So in this case we get a free longsword and a free stone, which is at least something. So 1 sword and 1 stone. Also, because we use the longship, we get another random weapon, which is another bow and arrow. With his last 3 Vikings, Yellow decides to go whaling. So first he gets to draw an occupation card. Before he actually does the action, he does 2 things. First he spends 3 silver to get another whaling boat. And then as a free action you can also arm your boats if there's spaces for ore on it. So he places one ore on this whaling boat. Each whaling boat has one pre-printed ore, so basically among his 3 boats there's now 4 ore. Now with this whaling action you can use as many whaling boats as you like. You roll the blue die, you roll as low as possible, and the results can be improved with spears and wood. Also, each ore counts as an improvement of 1, so basically from our roll we can immediately subtract 4. And that's 1, so basically result is 0. The healing is successful without the need to give up anything else. And so we get oil, skin and bones, and whale meat. We determine the next star player. It's yellow. And then move into the income phase, but first everybody can improve their board again. The blue player decides to put stuff on Iceland only. A hide over here, then a silver over here, and then he's allowed to cover the 4. Yellow decides not to add anything to his board yet. The red player places a chest here and another one here, and then he can take yet another chest and place it like this, covering the 6. Now the red player could also use both the chest and the runestone and the 3 silver in the house to unlock the hide bonus, but I don't think that's worth it because in houses, as I said, you can also put orange and red tiles, so let's keep them for later for the home board. Blue then receives an income of 4 for his home board, plus 5 from Iceland for a total of 9. Yellow receives 4 and red receives 7. Then we move into the breeding phase. Blue doesn't have any animals. Red has a pregnant sheep, so he gets another one, and this one is turned to the other side. And yellow has a pregnant cow, so he also receives another one for the feast. Blue decides to place his tiles like this. Yellow did not want to give up the huge fruit or whale meat pieces, so he decided to interchange red and silver. He won't get the bonus for not having meat, but that's fine. And red is in a bit of a trouble because he only has 1 piece of flax, but he has several sheep and lots of silver, so let's see what he actually decides. Because the thing is, for each space that you can't fill, you get one of these tokens which are -3 victory points. And red decides to solve it like this. He could have taken another sheep and put it upside down because he already has a sheep horizontally. Then you only have to pay 1 silver, but basically 1 sheep is 2 victory points, 2 silver are 2 victory points, but the sheep are more useful if you upgrade them later on because then you can actually place them on your home board. Then bonuses. Blue receives a meat, a wood and a fish. Also he can turn 1 meat into oil. Red receives ore, wood, stone and a runestone, and yellow receives ore and meat. Then the mountain scripts. We remove 1 from each. All of them are still in play, plus we reveal another one. And then finally we remove all our Vikings and move on into round number 5. So first of all, everybody receives their second to last Viking. Then another harvest. This time is goods 1 to 3. So basically everything except fruit. Peas, flax, beans, wheat and cabbage for everyone. Then exploration boards once again. This time we have to turn D. So all this money is discarded and Greenland becomes Newfoundland. But we put money on Baffin Island and Bear Island. Everybody gets a new weapon. And then there's actions. Yellow starts by building a Knar for 2 wood. Red decides to visit the smithy. So let's pay 1 ore. Can select 1 item with the tongue symbol. But first he gets to draw another occupation card. And he decides to take this one. Blue decides to go trading, so he can pay for up to 2 special tiles. But first again also gets to draw an occupation card. He decides to get the helmet and the glass beads for a total of 1. He puts the helmet on Iceland down here. So the 5 can be covered to be able to cover the 6. These 2 spaces as well as this one needs to be covered. So he puts the silver on here and then the glass beads on here. Yellow plays it slow, decides to turn flax into linen. Red decides to build another longbow for 2 wood. He can also draw another card. Blue goes to the market to get 2 meat and 2 silver. Yellow decides to go and hunt game. He has 2 wood and 1 bow and arrow. And that's not good. Also not too good. And he's lucky. He takes the 3, so he gives up 1 bow and arrow and 2 wood. And then the hunt is successful and gives him 1 hide and 1 game meat. The red player, as a free action, decides to arm one of his 2 longboats with ore. There's 3 spaces for ore on it, so 2 of those are now filled. And then he decides to go pillaging. Now pillaging takes d12, you have to roll high, you can use swords and stone, and he has plenty of both. Let's try again. And once again. That's very lucky because he has a 12. Each blue tile has a conquering value. For example, those range from 6 for the runestones up to 15 for the silver hordes. And the special tiles also have some, so for example the crucifix has 8 and the crown of England has 16, and this is exactly what he wants. So if he rolled a 12 to get 16, he needs 4 more, so he gives up 3 swords and 1 stone. Stop. I forgot to count the ore. The ore gives 1 additional point, so actually he only needs to give up 2 swords and can keep the other sword and the stone. And then let's not forget, since he used the longship for any purpose, he can draw a random weapon card. The blue player decides to once again buy a whaling boat for 3. Use the action down here to turn it into a knar and immigrate with that knar. Although now we're in round 5, that costs him 5 silver. And then he can play a card. He decides to play the Spice Merchant, which will allow him in rounds where there's no harvest, so basically only the one that's left, he would be allowed to turn 2 oil into spices, which is a good combo because he has means to generate oil. The yellow player takes his usual space, so he gets spices, silver, 2 milk and wool. He's also allowed to play an occupation card. He decides to play the Foreign Trader, which allows him, before he takes the Overseas Trading action, which are these 2, he's allowed to upgrade 1 good. Red decides to go pillaging once more. He'll obviously roll again. And again. Okay, he's at a 10. Plus 2 for the ore is 12. So he decides to give up 2 swords and a stone, so he can claim the silver horde with a conquering value of 15. And then he gets to draw another card. It's a spare. The blue player decides to take 3 upgrade actions. He turns the game meat into skin and bones, and the 2 meat into 2 oil. Yellow decides to pay a stone to be able to play 1 card to get a silver. He plays the ship's cook, which allows him, before overseas trading, to upgrade 1 good, but only salted meat, game meat or whale meat. But now basically before taking an overseas trading action, he can upgrade 2 goods. Then it's his turn again, and of course he takes an overseas trading action. First of all, he has to pay 1 silver. Then, thanks to the ship's cook, he can turn whale meat into a rope. And thanks to the Foreign Trader, he can turn a cow into cloth. And then he can turn any number of different green goods into blue goods. And, well, through miraculous planning, he has 1 of each green good. They all become blue now. And then with his final action, he decides to use this trading action to turn this meat into oil and the game meat into skin and bones. Then yellow keeps the start play token. Then we have income, but first of all, we're going to puzzle again. Blue places a silver up here and then 2 oil up here. So Iceland is basically done and he'll get an income of 8 for it. And on his main board, hunting for more income is probably not a good idea in the second to last turn, so he starts to cover up minus spaces. So his income is 4 plus 8 for a total of 12. Red places a silver hoard in here, a runestone like this, a treasure chest, and another runestone over here. So he can legally cover the 7, and the 9, which he wouldn't be able to cover, is not covered yet. On a second thought, instead of a runestone, he decides to simply use a silver, because then he can fit the crown of England in here. Then of course he could use the runestone plus 4 more silver to increase his income. Since it raises from 9 to 12, that's probably a good idea. So runestone over here, 2 silver down here, 1 more in here, and then he can cover this one. And then he receives an income of 12. And after puzzling everything he has into the yellow player's board, it looks like this. So he also gets an income of 12. Then we can move into animal breeding. Yellow's cow becomes pregnant again, so does red's sheep. Feast. Since he only had orange goods, the red player had to put some silver in between. For the yellow player it looks like this, so this time he doesn't use any meat, so he gets 1 silver. And for the blue player it was rather easy, thanks to 2 emigrations. Then bonuses. Blue gets a fish, a wood and a meat. He can also turn one meat into oil. And since he needs the second oil later on, let's say in hindsight that he actually didn't place this tile. Red gets a runestone, ore and wood and a stone. And yellow gets meat and ore. Then we can update the mountain strips. We remove one from each. No strip needs to be removed. So we actually put out a fifth one. And then everybody gets back the Vikings, and we can move into the sixth and last round. Everybody gets the last Viking. There is no harvest. Since there's no harvest, blue can turn 2 oil into spices. No exploration boards need to be turned. Then everybody gets a new weapon. And then we can start the final round of actions. Thanks to his Peacemaker card, the red player can take a stone instead of getting a weapon. Yellow starts by using the smithy action. He pays 1 ore. Now the only tile he could actually take from the special board is the crucifix. And that's not a really good fit for the space left on his home board. So he actually decides to take the jewelry tile because it also has the tongs symbol. And of course he can draw a new occupation card. Since he has 2 longships, red could actually perform the plundering action where he simply receive a silver hoard, but the problem is he wouldn't be able to place it anywhere, so that's probably not the best option. So he decides to first arm his longship once more and then take a pillaging action. Let's roll again. Let's roll again. Okay, so a 5. Thanks to the ore, this is considered an 8. He doesn't have any long swords actually, but he has 3 stones, so he could get a result of up to 11. So he decides to spend 2 stone for a result of 10 and get a jewelry tile. And let's not forget, he gets a new weapon. Blue goes trading again. First he gets a new occupation card, and then he buys both the shield and the grail for a total of 11, which is almost all his money. Yellow uses another ore to arm his second whaling boat, and then performs a whaling action. He gets to draw an occupation card first. There are 5 ore on his boats. So let's roll again. Now 8 minus 5 is 3. He can give up 3 harpoons. It's the last round. Yeah, let's do it before we risk rolling, I don't know, a 10 or 11. So giving up 3, did I say harpoons? I wanted to say spares. And then he gets oil, skin and bones and whale meat. Red decides to pay a silver to get another sheep. Blue decides to take 3 resources from 1 strip, and he can also upgrade 1 good. He decides to take 2 stone and the silver off here, and he upgrades the cabbage to skin and bones. Yellow gets 2 salted meat at the market, that costs him 2 silver. Red takes this action, so he can take up to 4 resources from 1 mountain strip. He can also double upgrade 2 tiles, so he turns the peas and the cabbage into skin and bones and wool respectively. Also, since it was the 4th column, he can play yet another one-time card, the sheep sharer. With at least 4 sheep, he can get 2 wool. Blue takes 2 resources from 1 mountain strip, that's 4 silver. Yellow takes an overseas trading action, he has to pay 1 silver. Thanks to the cook, he can turn salted meat into linen. And thanks to the foreign trader, he can turn sheep into fur. And then all these tiles get flipped to the blue side. Red performs an immigration action, that costs him 6 silver. And one of his longboats is moved up here. Blue takes this immigration action. He also gets to draw an occupation card. He has to pay 6 silver as well. But then his 3rd knar can be moved up here. Yellow decides to upgrade 2 goods. He turns salted meat into linen, cabbage into game meat. Red goes to the market and gets flax, fish and silver. Blue selects this crafting space. But first, he could draw another occupation card, but he decides to use his tutor to play one instead. He plays the chief. It's a one-time card, it will give him 7 victory points, but he has to have a feast immediately, and then will participate in the regular feast at the end of the turn as well. does it like this. Feast phase performed. And then you can turn 2 stone and 2 wood into 2 chests and 2 rune stones. Yellow takes 1 resource, stone, and gets perform 1 upgrade. He turns game meat into skin and bones. Then it's his turn again. Moves down here, pays a stone to play a card and get a silver. He decides to play the miller, mostly for the 3 victory points. And then with his final pawn, the most sensible action he can take is move here, take some beans and a silver. We can skip determining the start player, so let's move to the income, but of course first everybody puzzles. Red puts skin and bones up here, an ore up here. He can't place a jewelry here yet. First he puts wool here, then a rune stone here, some more wool down here. Now we can legally place the jewelry tile. And finally he places an ore, although I guess technically it would not be necessary, but now at least it looks nice. Then down here on the house he can still put 1 wood and stone to avoid these negative points, and then he can put the wool on these 2 spaces. So his income is 18. However, this final income is not paid out, it's noted directly as score, so red has a final income score of 18. Yellow puts jewelry here and some skin bones here, and some silk and linen, jewelry, a rune stone and spices. So he also gets 18 noted as his final income on the scoring pad. In a more or less desperate attempt to cover as many of those -1 spaces as possible, blue's board looks like this at the end. So his final income is 4 plus 8, 12. Then animals breed 1 last time. So red gets another sheep. And yellow gets another cow. And then it's a feast, and after that the game will be over, because the last 3 phases, including the bonuses, are not played in the last round. Red has to slaughter a sheep and uses flax and fish. Yellow uses all the stuff he has left, including whale meat and fruit. And blue unfortunately made a little calculation error. He has no silver left to place in here, so he receives a -3 penalty. But I think it was still worth to play the chief, because that's still a net gain of 4 points. Then we can go over the final score. Ships. Blue doesn't have any ships left. Red has 1 longboat for 8. Yellow has 3 whaling boats and a longboat for a total of 14. Next up, emigrations. Blue has 54. Red has 21. Yellow does not have anything. Then exploration boards. Blue is the only one to have something here. He has 16. Then sheds and houses. And yes, not much did happen in that regard in this game. So the only player who has a house is red. It's worth 10 points. We'll care about the minus points later on. Then sheep and cattle. Red has 4 sheep, which are worth 2 apiece. Yellow has 4 cattle, which are worth 3 apiece. Occupations. For blue, 3, 4, 6, 8, 15. For red it's 2, 4, 5, 6. And for yellow it's 6, 7, 9, 10. Then silver. Blue has nothing, red has 6, and yellow has 14. Finally, the English crown. Red has it, so he gets 2, and the others of course have nothing. Then let me just calculate the positive subtotals and I'll be right back. So for the positive subtotals we have blue at 97, red at 79 and yellow at 68. However, for the home board, red and yellow are in the clear because their boards are complete. However, blue has a whopping minus 33 points. Exploration boards, everybody's fine. The only one who had one was blue and his one is covered. Then for sheds and houses, red has 5 negative points and blue has 1 thing penalty of minus 3. So looking at final scores, blue has 61, yellow has 68 and red has 74, making him the overall winner. And that was one full game of A Feast for Odin. Before I wrap this up, let me quickly show you some of the types of occupation cards you didn't see. You saw the conditional cards and the once cards. However, there are also anytime cards. Basically, anytime you want, you can perform the indicated action. In this case, exchange one cow for a piece of jewelry. And then there are the green as soon as cards. Basically, they have a as soon as condition, and if that condition is fulfilled anytime after you played or even at the moment you played, then you get the reward. There's also one rule detail that did not come up during the walkthrough, and that is that on some of the spaces where you roll the die, there are Vikings depicted on the lower left, and that simply means if you fail during the attempt, then not only do you get the consolation prize, but you can return one or even two of the Vikings that you used to take that action to your home board and can use them again in a later action. Let me briefly talk about some other details. So the normal game goes for 7 rounds, so you actually have a harvest phase where you get every single harvest good there is in the game. Otherwise the game is completely the same. The rules say that the long game is the normal game and that the shorter game should be used to familiarize yourself with the game, or if you're very experienced, to find a new kind of challenge. Then let's talk about the 4-player game. It's basically the same. You get one more mountain strip, and also you get these 2 special tiles, which are placed at the bottom. They have 2 sides. You choose one randomly for each tile, and basically what it does, there are 2 action spaces, either in the first or second column, and the other one either in the third or fourth. And basically what it does is it allows you to copy the action of another player in that column. In the solo game, you actually use Vikings of 2 colors. You start with 1 color on your Ting square as usual. You stack the additional Vikings like this, and 5 Vikings of the other color are down here on this waiting space. So at the beginning of the first round, you'll get a Viking. You'll place 6 Vikings here as usual in a long game. But at the end of the round, the Vikings stay on the board. Then in the second round, you move the Vikings up here. You get 2 additional ones. So now you have 7, as you would in the second round of the long game. You place them on the board, but now of course some of the spaces are occupied. At the end of the second round, you return the blue Vikings, and the yellow ones stay on the board, and so on and so on. And of course, in phase 6, you are always the next starting player, and that basically is the solo game. You try for the best score possible. You start with a different occupation card, of course, every time. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this overview of A Feast for Odin. First of all, sorry for those dumb mistakes, which also takes me to the next point. Please don't take this video as strategic advice for how to perform well in this game. First of all, I was trying to show you as many different things as possible, which probably not led to very strategic play in the first place. And also in hindsight, it's probably not a good idea to have all those livestock just laying around and breeding. It's probably better to upgrade it and actually use it on the board. And second, the, let's call it, side projects like islands and houses and sheds, I guess should be used more, because otherwise you're not really generating any points. Much of what you're doing in the game is just avoiding negative points. Now, a couple of random thoughts about the game and its mechanics. Let's maybe start with the most obvious mechanic, the puzzling. While theme-wise it's probably a bit hard to explain, I think it's a really cool mechanic. First of all, the puzzling is of course interesting in itself, but also it makes you think, because you don't always have to go for the best, i.e. blue goods. You only have to go for them if you need them on your board. Also, you can't just do the same thing over and over again, always getting the biggest tiles, but at some point you don't need them anymore. So this basically forces you to adapt your strategies. While of course you need a lot of tokens for this to actually work, I think the solution with the storage tray is a very good one. Although you're handling a lot of stuff, it doesn't really feel fiddly. Next, the occupation cards. I really like them. First, because since you're starting with one, it gives you a direction to move into. This is something I felt was missing in Caverna, because everything was wide open. I also like the idea that when placing 3 or 4 Vikings, you get to draw and play a card respectively. This happens as a side effect, which allows for cool combos, and you don't have to spend actions to only play those cards. If you want to play or draw many cards, yes, there's certain actions for that, but the cards happen as a byproduct of the gameplay itself. And then finally, the die rolling. There's actually a little section in the rulebook, I guess we can call it a designer's note, where this is further discussed. So obviously there's luck, which is kind of an odd thing in a development game, but that little section says the randomness should help to bring across the theme of adventure and uncertainty, and it also notes that if you fail, the consolation prize is not that much worse than other actions you could have taken with the same amount of Vikings. You can definitely plan for the randomness. I mean, you get 2 rerolls. You can also stuff up on the things you can use to improve your roll beforehand. There are ways to mitigate it, but the fact remains there's luck involved in the game, and if you don't like this in this kind of game, then there's probably not much you can do, but at least you should give it a try. Okay, so I guess that's it. As always, thanks for watching, have fun playing, and until next time, bye bye.